Hello, my name is Yorkie and welcome to episode 4 of the in-depth track guide series for Assetto Corsa Competizione, where I give you all the juicy knowledge, tips and information that you need in order to improve your knowledge of a circuit and improve your lap times. As we're following the 2019 calendar in ACC, this fourth episode is going to be at Paul Ricard in France. The circuit's length is 3.58 miles, 5.77 kilometers with 13 turns. The setup that you're going to be looking to apply to your car is going to be mainly medium downforce with medium to hard suspension. As you can see, there's actually a number of overtaking opportunities around the circuit. And although the track gets hated on by quite a large number of viewers in the racing community, I'm hoping that this track guide will allow you to learn the circuit a little bit better, let you enjoy it a little bit more, and open your eyes as to how good GT3 car racing can be around this track. So let's kick off this guide by taking a look at the pit entry and pit exit. The pit entry is just after the final corner on the right hand side of the circuit, and pretty much as soon as you come into the pit lane and turn off the circuit, you are met with the pit limiter line. So be prepared, slow the car down early and make sure you engage the pit limiter just as you're coming through and turning right into the pit lane. For the pit exit, the disengage the pit limiter line is right at the end of the pit wall, just before we get to the bridge. So once you reach this point, obviously you're going to disengage the limiter, come out of the pit lane and onto the circuit, and you're going to be coming right out onto the racing line as you stick to the right hand side of the white line that extends from the pit lane itself. Now when it comes to turn 1, obviously watch out for anybody coming out of the pit lane on your approach to this first corner, but our braking point is going to be in and around the 100 meter board. Some cars will allow you to brake on the 100 meter board, some you may need to brake about 10 meters earlier. We're going to be dropping the car down into second or third gear depending on the car's gear ratios, and we're going to be hammering this inside curb looking to hook up the apex just here. You can hit this hard in the dry, in the wet though you may need to be a little bit more cautious. The curb itself is serrated with a flat piece beyond it, and then on the very inside there are a set of yellow baguette curbs. Now coming out of turn 1 and into turn 2, you want to be hanging towards the middle of the circuit. There is a dip that rises up into a crest when we come into the apex of the second corner. Now because of this crest, the car will get a little bit light and you will lose some grip. So in the majority of cars you want to be avoiding taking that inside curb. Some cars will allow you to take it. The curb itself is actually composed of a rumble strip, but it is raised up above the track surface and stands quite tall. So clipping the inside of this can unsettle the car quite easily, and therefore in the wet conditions you want to be avoiding it entirely. For the exit of the corner, we have a serrated curb with a set of yellow baguette curbs. For the dry conditions you can use this no problem, however in the wet you'll be wanting to avoid this curb to avoid losing any potential traction. Also out here, and for the first time in the in-depth track guide series, we come across these track limit boards. Now you want to be avoiding touching these and getting the car back to the inside of these over towards the circuit, because hitting these will get your lap time either invalidated or get yourself a track limits warning. After a very short straight, we then come into turn 3, and this is our braking point here at the 100 marker board. We're going to be shifting down the gears down into second and turning the car into the right hander and hooking up our apex on the inside curb. Now you can use quite a lot of this curb in the dry conditions, also in the wet you can take a fair amount here as well. Just be careful and make sure that you still keep two wheels within the white lines of the circuit. After turn 3 we immediately come into the left hander of turn 4, and this is our apex that we are looking to hook up on the inside curb. Now you can run this curve for quite a while in the dry conditions, however in the wet conditions you'll be wanting to avoid it pretty much entirely. Coming off the exit of turn 4 and into the braking zone of turn 5, you want to be trying to keep the car as tight to the left hand side of the circuit as possible to open up this right hander. This is our braking zone, and we're going to be dropping the car down into first gear before turning in towards our apex, which is going to be just here on the inside curb. You want to take a fair amount of this curb that is here, and you want to be trying to pick up the power as early as possible. Your run through this corner is going to be crucial, as this is the starting point for lining up a good drive onto the long back straight. So coming off the exit of turn 5, make use of the exit curb, however don't venture out too far out to the yellow baguette curbs that are out there, as venturing out this wide will of course hurt your traction coming off the corner and onto turn 6. So turn 6 is the next crucial piece in the puzzle to get a good run onto the long back straight, and we're going to use an early apex to try and get a good smooth line coming through the corner and bring in the power as soon and as smoothly as we possibly can. As we come out through the exit, you want to be trying bringing the car back over to the right hand side to open up turn 7, where we're going to clip our apex in and around here. You don't necessarily have to use the inside curb, but you want to try and keep your steering angle going through this corner as minimal as you possibly can. This will help you avoid scrubbing speed as you're coming through the corner, and as the exit curb is completely flat, it's just basically red and white painted tarmac, you can let the car drift out to the right and out wide off the circuit. However, don't venture out too far, as you need to bring the car back in and get back onto the left of these track limit boards that are placed here at the exit before we then come onto the long back straight. This long back straight, otherwise known as the Mistral Strait, gives you an opportunity to relax and take a breath and ultimately prepare yourself for the very final technical remaining section of the track. The next corner is a right-hander, turn 8, and requires an awful lot of commitment. You're going to place the car as far left as you possibly can to open up the corner, give a short brief squeeze on the brake and dropping it down into 5th gear in and around the 75 meter mark, and then smoothly turn the car into our apex on the inside curve around about here. Now you can use a fair amount of curb here on the inside if you so wish. However, in the wet conditions, I would advise to probably stay away from it, because running this inside curb in those wet slippery conditions at this high speed will likely cause the car to start to slide and spin out. But you want to be trying to carry as much speed and momentum through the corner as you possibly can, so you're going to let the car drift out wide to the left of the circuit, and you can run pretty far out wide here. But again, just like coming onto the Mistral Strait, you want to try and bring the car back in before you reach the track limit boards that are here just beyond the curb. We then very quickly come into the braking zone for the long sweeping right-hander of turn 9, which is a corner that catches an awful lot of people out, especially at this first entry part here. There isn't really anything to use as reference for the braking zone, but we're going to drop the car down into 3rd gear, turn it in, and look to hook up our first apex on this inside curb. You want to be cautious with this in the wet conditions, but you want to try and glide the car through the corner. Try and not let it run out too far wide, as we let the car continue to decelerate as we continue to progress through the turn, and as the corner starts to tighten up once again, if you need to, gently apply and use the brakes to help bring the speed back down and in towards the second apex. In some cars you want to drop down into 2nd gear. For the majority though, you can remain in 3rd. And then we're going to bring the car into the apex of this second part of turn 9, where we're going to clip the inside curb here. You can take quite a lot of curb in the dry conditions. Just make sure that you keep 2 wheels within the white lines to avoid picking up a track limits penalty. And then in the wet conditions, just be cautious if you're going to go in and touch this curb. It can sometimes lead the car into a spin. Coming off the exit of the corner, hopefully you've carried plenty of speed and momentum through the very long right-hander, but we have a serrated curb out here with a rumble strip just beyond it. Ideally you don't want to be venturing out too far onto this curb, especially in the wet conditions where it will hurt your traction, but you can use it in the dry conditions if you find yourself having picked up the throttle a little bit too early at the apex. But pretty quickly after the exit of turn 9 we come into the braking zone of turn 10, and it starts roughly in and around this area. Now there's multiple lines in this braking zone here into the corner. Generally going over towards the middle to the right hand side of the circuit opens up the turn a little bit more for yourself, but obviously watch out for anyone trying to dive up your inside in race conditions. Our actual apex for this turn 10 left-hander is going to be very late in the corner, roughly around this sort of point. Now be careful with the inside curb here in both the dry and wet conditions. It's a very highly raised rumble strip curb. Avoid it completely in the wet and be cautious in the dry. Some cars will allow you to take the curb, others will prefer you staying just shy of it. Out through the exit we have a serrated curb with a rumble strip beyond it. There are also track limit boards here as well, but you can use a fair amount of this exit curb in the majority of cars without too much issue. Obviously avoid it in the wet because it will cost you the traction off the corner. Turn 11 is the long right-hander that continues with this curb, and you can take this completely flat out in all cars, although make sure to stay on the track surface rather than on the actual curb before we then come into the braking zone of turn 12. And this is going to begin at the end of the curbing on the right-hand side of the track. To straighten this braking zone out as much as possible, we're going to mount the curb on the right hand side and then brake and shift down into second gear. We're going to linger in and around the middle of the circuit, then bring the car in for a late apex in this long left-hander. You can use the inside curb in the dry conditions, although in the wet you'll be wanting to avoid it entirely. And then coming off the corner, we want to hang tight to the left-hand side of the circuit and try and open up the final corner as much as possible. There's no real reference for our braking point, so we're just going to be getting hard on the brakes in and around here, dropping the car down into first gear and turning the car into the final right-hander of turn 13. Our apex is going to be just off the inside curb, just around about here, and as the curb is quite a big and heavily raised one, hitting it too hard with the car will bounce and unsettle it and therefore hurt our traction off the corner. So we're going to avoid it in both the dry and wet conditions. We want to try and straighten the car up as much as possible to try and translate the power down into the tarmac and give ourselves the best drive off the final turn onto the start-finish straight. You can use this exit curb that's out here. Avoid using in the wet conditions, but in the dry you've obviously got these baguette curbs to also contend with, as well as the track limits boards that are out here. So you don't want to run out too far wide, as you're potentially going to ruin your lap time and also leave yourself vulnerable on the run to the start finish straight and the start of the next lap. So now that we have completed a look at all the corners around Paul Ricard, it's now time to jump in the car and go for a flying lap and view it at racing speed.
Well done, mate. That's not bad.
So with the flying lap done and dusted, that leaves just one last thing for this episode, and that is some of the braking zones and some of the curbs around the circuit are going to be dependent on the car, the setup and the conditions that you are driving in. I've hinted at this at various different points throughout the episode, but obviously make sure that you are taking care and adjusting to the car and the conditions where necessary. Other than that though, thank you very much for watching episode 4 of the In-Depth Track Guide series. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments section below. Alternatively, check out the description for links to my Discord where you can come and talk to me a little bit more directly, as well as the others in the community. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing to the channel as well as my social media pages. It'll be very much appreciated. Other than that though, thanks very much for watching. Hopefully I shall catch you in the next one. Until then, have fun, stay safe and take care.